Okay, so we're gonna have a lot of fun with this chapter. I kind of wanted to go over creating your own mechanical stamp brushes, such as, let me give you a little demo here, such as this bad boy right here. And these are just great to have. It's really great to build a library. The ones that you're going to see me create in this video right here, I'm actually going to go ahead and include in the DVD, but I do encourage you to create your own because first of all, it's just a lot of fun, and it's probably one of my favorite things to do because it's so instantly gratifying, like nothing else is when you're sculpting. And you get to use them all over the place and be as messy as you want with them, and they still look great. So, and what I recommend you do is don't I mean, you can make these up out of your head, but I'm just going to go ahead and turn on symmetry, radial symmetry here on the z-axis so I can get that going. But go ahead and maybe you have a reference folder. I have a huge reference folder full of mechs and stuff similar to that. And just go through those and look at all the little details that they have and any cylindrical detail that they might have or any other kind of small detail that you think you can create a stamp out of. Go ahead and do it, and it will serve great for everything. So there's a few setup things that we need to do. First of all, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and make sure that when we divide in our geometry, smooth is turned off. Because when we divide it when it's smooth, you see we kind of get this little nasty edge right here that when we use our grab dock to grab the alpha, it'll give us a edge that we don't want. So we can go ahead and go back, turn off smooth, and now when we divide, it's all crisp and nice and neat. So I'm going to go ahead and I have a reference item here that I want to create. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and go into my standard brush. See here, it really doesn't matter which matte cap I use. I'll go ahead and just use that one just for kicks. What I try to do is I just try to get my details as close to the edge as possible without getting to the edge. Because when we do get to the edge, things just get kind of messy. And when you make it too small, your brush, you can still make it small, but you'll have to zoom in to get your, to grab your alpha. But we can cover that in just a little bit. So I have this detail right here, and I'm just gonna kind of show you how I'm gonna create it. So it protrudes out a little bit like this, and this is actually too high resolution. So I can go ahead and go down. I want this to be responsive, so I can go ahead and pull this out into the kind of shape that I want it to be. And then use the H polish brush to kind of smooth that out a bit. And so I actually want that to be a bit sharper. So I'm going to go ahead and use my standard brush. Pull this out pretty steeply. About something like that. Okay, so we have that and it looks great. So we can use the H polish brush to kind of pull this area out a little bit. Or kind of cut this in a little bit. And again, I'm looking at reference now. I'm not making this up from my mind, which would be really cool if I could, but I don't think I'm that clever. So we're going to use a great reference. And so I want to go ahead and use the Damien standard brush out here. And you'll notice that like when I don't have enough radial drawing points, it starts to get less circular the more I go out because I myself cannot draw a perfect circle. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is come into radial count and just pump that up. And I'm gonna use that to cut into the mesh ever so slightly. There we go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and use my pinch brush to pinch that a bit, just to clean it up. And then I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out as well, just ever so slightly. There we go. Okay, and so I am going to do the same thing right here. And actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to mask this out right here. Mask that out just ever so slightly. Invert the mask, and then I want to go ahead and inflate this a bit. Just a little bit. And actually, I want to go ahead and smooth that as well. And there's a good reason for that. It's because if you create too many 90-degree angles, the alpha will get too jagged, and it won't give you smooth edges when you're actually stamping the stamp. Okay, and on this particular stamp, I actually want to go ahead and turn off radial symmetry and turn on X and Y symmetry, so I can get a nice clean line that I want to draw right here. And I guess I'll go ahead and mask it, because that'll be easier. So I'll go ahead and mask this area, and then unmask. Go ahead and select mask rectangle, just to make this a bit easier. And select an area about that size. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I can either use the clipping brushes, which I'll actually go ahead and try. And I'll just go ahead and clip about right there. Alright, so that's a bit much. So I can go ahead and clip right about here. And that looks a little bit better. Well, we can go ahead and test it and see. I was thinking maybe I'll need to smooth this area out a bit, but it might be okay. Any geometry that goes away from the camera at this angle, 90 degrees away from the camera, can be a problem. But we will see if we run into that when we start playing with the stamp and modifying the settings. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my document, and I'm going to change the size to 500/500. Because the size of our document determines the size of our grab doc. And we don't really need, these alphas don't need to be of very, very high quality, so we can go ahead and resize. Alright, perfect. And so now, let me just redraw this on the canvas, and then edit it. And now what I want to do is I want to size this up and get it almost to the edge where things are getting edited without actually getting to that edge. So I want to get about right there, and I want to go ahead and click Grab Doc. It's actually over here in the alpha palette, or the alpha sub palette as well, right here. And you see now I have this alpha, kind of weird looking screw alpha. And you notice that actually it's not purely positive. It actually dips down a little bit and then goes up. So that could pose a problem for us, in a way that I will show you right now. So we have a polysphere, and now I'm going to go ahead and change to the standard brush, and I'm going to change the stroke type to drag dot for now. And so we can go ahead and try this. First of all, I'm just going to go ahead and gotta select my alpha first. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this on, and you can see it doesn't look like the mesh we made. Almost at all. So what I want to go ahead and do is, first of all, I need to up the intensity. So we can go ahead and go to the Z intensity and move that up, and we can turn on lazy mouse or turn off lazy mouse as well, excuse me. It's not really needed. Alright, and you'll see we get this. That's a bit strong, but you notice we're getting this kind of bowing effect. It's kind of going over the top like that. And that's not because of the sphere. What it actually is the focal shift. The focal shift determines the fall off of the brush, and so we need to have a very sharp fall off at the very edge if we want to make the brush have a clean overall feel to it. So we'll go ahead and create that, and it's a bit high on the intensity, so we can go ahead and turn down the intensity a bit more than that. Alright, so that seems about good. But now you notice we're getting this kind of edge right here, and the reason that we're getting that is because in the alpha, we have an area of the mesh that is lower than the plane of the mesh. And so when ZBrush grabs the document, it uses the lowest point as black and the highest point as white. And so that means that our actual plane is gray, and gray is going to be lifted up. So we need to change the mid value. The only way to really get the mid value perfect is to toy with it. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of move it up to about 6 and draw this on the plane. And so we need to move it a bit more. And what we want to do is we want to move it until it sinks in. Okay, so now we have it sinking in. So it's in between the last two values we had. So we'll go maybe to 10. And sometimes you'll never get it exactly perfect. It's a little bit high now, so maybe we'll go to 11. All right, and so that's about as good as we're going to get it. And there's a few ways we can get rid of this seam that we're seeing around here. And one of the ways we can do it is go into the alpha palette, and there's a function right here called radial fade. And what it does is it fades off the alpha. So when we actually draw it on there, it will fade the edges so we can't see them, which is exactly what we want. And so now you can see we're getting a pretty good shape here. And you'll notice drag dot, the direction you drag actually matters for the orientation of the alpha. If I drag to the left, you can see the kind of screw port will be vertically, and if I drag down, it'll be perpendicular to that. And so that's important to keep in mind. The other option you can use for these kinds of stamps is drag rectangle, and that's just to kind of change the size, and you can rotate it around. I prefer drag dot because it keeps all of the, if I have the brush the same size, it'll keep all of my my strokes consistent. So if I have, say, 3 ports that I want, I can go ahead and just draw 1, 2, 3, and they'll all stay relatively consistent, which is it's really what we want for this. So I think I want to actually affect the intensity just a bit more, turn it up ever so slightly. And okay, so this brush is giving us really nice results. So we can go ahead and now save this brush by going up here. We're going up to our brush palette, and we can save it as. And let's go ahead and save this as Eat 3D Mac Brush 001. Perfect. So there's one brush. Okay, so the next brush I want to create is actually this brush is going to be very quick to make, but it is incredibly useful. It's basically an angled screw port, and all we're going to use is the trim hole brush to cut into the mesh and then pull it back out. And actually don't even need radial symmetry here, or symmetry at all. So what we can go ahead and do is we can go ahead and just angle this ever so slightly, and then go ahead and just use the trim hole brush to cut into the mesh, and then it's a bit too much of an angle, so we'll go ahead and cut into the mesh, and then we can go ahead and pull it back out. And so you can see now we have this just really nice screw port, and we're getting a little bit of banding here because there's not enough resolution at this angle at 90 degrees to keep that up. So what we can do is we can just go ahead and use, oopsies, we can go ahead and just use the smooth function to smooth that out a bit. And you can see right away we have just a gorgeous alpha that we can use. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to about the size we need. Divide that actually once more, but I want to turn on smoothing so I can get a smooth result. There we go. So that's a very clean alpha. So I'm going to go ahead and just zoom up to about where I want it. And then we can go ahead and grab the document. So now we can go to the standard brush again. And I'm going to dupe the brush just so I can have one extra. So I can always go back to my standard brush. Otherwise, you'll replace the brush when you save it or when you start modifying it. So okay, we have our alpha. So we can go ahead and select the alpha. Come back here. Go ahead and change the stroke type to drag dot. And so right off the bat, there's a few things we need to change. We need to change the Z intensity. That's one thing. We need to turn it up quite a bit. And that actually looks pretty good right there. And so when I drag this way, you notice this screw port's facing up. And I actually kind of want to modify that. I want to change it so when I drag it, this screw port will face this way. When I drag this way, I want it to face the way I'm dragging, kind of like I'm pushing in the screw in a way. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate the alpha. And that is perfect. That's exactly how I want it. So now we're getting this kind of raising effect, and there's a few reasons for that. We need to change the mid value and the focal shift. So we can go ahead and create a very sharp focal shift, a negative focal shift. And that's working pretty good. And now we need to really mess with the mid value. I'm thinking it'll be around 50 because you can see the mid value is basically where the plane is, and it's about 50%. There's maybe a little bit more on top than on bottom, but we will figure that out soon enough. Okay, so it's in between 40 and 60, so 50, I guess, is the next logical place to try. Alright, so it's still a bit high, so we can go to 45. And that is as good as it gets. Really, that's perfect. So what we can do is if we just want to be super safe, we can add a little bit of radial fade of the 1 or 2 caliber or degree. And this is going to be the beginnings of our screw port. So we can go ahead and draw this everywhere, and you can see how quickly you can just get a really nice result. And you can use the Damien standard brush to kind of even cut in areas and kind of bring them out. It's a terrible cut, but you get the idea. Okay, so we have the kind of basic shape of this, but what we really need is another cut into this. So if you want to, oopsies, we don't really want that alpha on my trim holes. So we have the alpha and we draw it on there, and this is really a two-step brush. So you need another brush that can cut into the mesh and create a nice effect. You could even use the brush we just made or any of the other mechanical brushes to kind of create an effect on here. What we can do is we can go ahead and come into our, let's just say this for instance, and just draw a nice little, we can use drag rectangle to get a smooth result. You can see you can get really nice screw effects here, and you can even use just a round circular alpha, such as this, or rather this. Oh, we have our mid value change, so we need to change that back down. And we can just go ahead and draw a little hole in here. And you can see really quickly you can get a nice screw port effect. Alright, so the next brush, or stamp, or brush, whatever you want to call it, I want to create is a brush that gives us a kind of visual feedback as to what we're supposed to do with the area in question. And when I say that, I mean when you see a knob, you know you're supposed to turn it. When you see a button, you know you're supposed to push it. Or a key, you know you're supposed to push it, like on the keyboard. And when you see something that rises and something that goes below it, you know you're supposed to kind of reach under there and pull to open something. And I'll show you visually what I mean by that. It's done better without words and better with the sculpt. We can go ahead and use certain types of symmetry to create this effect. No radial. So we can go ahead and what we're going to do is make a very rectangular alpha. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and invert this, and I'm just going to go ahead and inflate this. That's a bit much, actually. I'm going to go ahead and deflate that a bit. So around there. Alrighty, and now what we can do is we can go ahead and deselect that and mask out the areas we don't want to affect, because I want to keep these again as sharp as possible. And I just want to polish this a bit to about there. I think that looks actually really good. Maybe I'll just go ahead and clip that a bit. Polish it just ever so slightly. Okay, so that looks great. And you'll notice that this particular alpha does not go below 0, so we don't need to use any mid value for it. So again, we're just going to go ahead and lock the view into position, press F to frame the alpha, and we're going to go ahead and zoom into about where we think the edges start being affected. And I always give a little bit of buffer right here just to make sure that I'm not cutting off any of the alpha, because that can just be a real pain to deal with. So we can go ahead and grab dock that, and you can see we have a nice, just very plain alpha. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my standard brush. I'm going to go into brush palette, actually, and I want to clone this again to make sure I don't do anything funky with it. And actually, let's go ahead and save our last brush as well. So we can go ahead and go into the brush palette and save as. And we can save this as mech, or Eat3D Mech Brush 002. Okay, and so this will be our third one. This is going to be, like our previous one, this is going to be a two-pronged attack. Kind of, we're going to use this to flank our viewer unsuspectingly and make them feel like they want to open this. And how we're going to do that is, after we have our new brush selected, standard 2, we want to, actually I use drag rectangle for this one, and you'll see why in a moment. But I want to go ahead, I'll select this alpha, and let's go ahead and go to our sphere just for fun. Okay, so a few things we need to do. We need to change the radial, the focal shift. Turn it down almost to 100. Maybe 99 will be good. Okay, so we have our radial fall off within the brush at a very high area. So I'll actually need to turn it down a bit, because you can see we're getting a little bit of banding at the end. So we can go ahead and turn our focal shift down just ever so slightly. And then we can actually have a little bit of radial fade here. Okay, beautiful. So we're getting a pretty good effect. And now, in order for someone to feel like they want to, I'll go ahead and make just a standard cut with the Damien standard brush so you can see what I'm talking about here. And make the lazy radius a little bit higher so we can get a nice straight line. Okay, so we have what is a clear distinction between these two panels, if we're pretending that these are two separate panels, just for fun. Now we need to know, how are these panels supposed to work? How are they supposed to, how are we supposed to get access to what's under them? And the answer is we can use this brush that we've created right here, if we go ahead and select the correct brush. See here, standard 2, that's the one we want to go for. And I actually want to go ahead and turn this alpha too. We'll just rotate the alpha once. And if we use it in the negative, turn up the Z intensity a bit, use it in the negative right here, and then the positive right here. Kind of important to get the area right. You can see we visually know that we want to reach under this area right here and pull up right here to lift up this panel right here. And these kinds of visual feedback is good to give the illusion that someone actually designed the character and that it has some kind of function to it. So we can go ahead and save this brush as Eat3D Mech Brush 003. Okay, so now we can create one of the brushes that I use quite a bit for kind of a exhaust port. So this is a radial one, so we're going to go ahead and turn on radial symmetry and turn up the radial count quite a bit. And I'm going to use the standard brush to kind of cut into this ever so standardly. and kind of clip away at this area right here and make it as smooth as possible. Okay, so we kind of have this area, and I want to go ahead and actually smooth this out a little bit as well. And so we have this area down here that's kind of a little dip. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and pull this out. So we can pull it out to about there. That should be good. And just make sure that this is all even. The surface is even. Polish it a bit, ever so slightly. And then carve straight back into it. Just like that. And you'll notice, so there's a cool trick to this. You'll notice that all of the, if I can smooth this out just a little bit, all of the modifications we made are not in the positive. None of it is in the positive. It's all in the negative. So rather than messing with the mid value and just making a mess of things, the easiest way we can go about this is to go ahead and turn it around to where it's invisible, come down to display properties, and flip it. And now we have the complete opposite of what we had before. You can also click double and it'll show both sides, but I just click flip. It's no biggie. Okay, so now we want to go ahead and zoom in till about the edge of our modifications, per usual, and grab dock. And so we can go ahead and select our standard brush, clone it, and we can go ahead and select our alpha. And we can use drag dot. And now we can go ahead and start testing on our lovely polysphere. So we can go ahead and right away we notice that we need to turn up the Z intensity. And we actually want to go ahead and change the add to Z sub. And actually that looks perfect. Sometimes you get lucky and you get the right intensity. And we don't really need any modifications to the radial, or excuse me, the edge. We're not getting any banding at the edge or any artifacting, so we don't have to modify that at all. So we can just go ahead and save it. And it looks great. So we can go ahead into the, not load brush, we can go ahead and save brush. And we'll save it as numero 4. Okay, so we can come back to our plane. And we can go ahead and make a polymesh 3D. Turn off smoothing and divide it a few times. And we're just going to get into another stamp here. So we can go ahead, I want to use, most of these that I make are actually radial. And I think they're just more fun to create because the radial function in ZBrush is just so awesome. So we can go ahead and come in here, create the radius like that. And actually I want to make it a bit smaller, so we can go ahead and come in like that. Turn it off, and then inflate it to about there. So I think that should work just fine. Go ahead and let that go and smooth that out a little bit. And again, even if you want something to be 90 degrees, you can never make it actually 90 degrees, so it's always a good idea to just smooth it out a little bit. Even if you have to go up a subdivision and smooth it out. So you can go ahead and smooth this out just ever so slightly. We can come in here and use the Damien standard brush to cut into this mesh. And our Damien standard brush is using the wrong alpha. So go ahead and just come in here and use a really sharp alpha. Actually, might want to add a little bit more to that. Maybe a bigger size. Alright, so that's working a lot better. So I'm going to kind of come out to about here. Cut into that. I want to smooth it a bit. Not too much though. That looks great. Okay. And then one final thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and make a stroke through this that looks good. And so I'm just going to go ahead and use my standard brush, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off those symmetries and turn on X and Y. Change my brush size. Okay, and so I have pressure sensitivity on, so you notice the harder I press, the wider the brush gets, and I don't want that right now. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is come into my tablet pressure and change both size. I'm going to put it all the way up to the beginning. I'm going to put it all the way up to the top. And also my Z intensity is going to go all the way up to the top too, and that's going to normalize everything so it is all the same. And the reason I'm getting this kind of weird effect here is because I have too many symmetries on. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a nice line right there. And I think that's too close to the edge, so I'm just going to redraw that real quick. Alright, there we go. Alright, so this is a very pretty stamp we have here. So we can go ahead and frame it by pressing F, zoom in a little bit. There we go, about there should be good. And we can go ahead and grab the document. And then clone the brush. Select our new alpha. Jump over to our Z-sphere. That has some stamps already on it. It's kind of cool to leave the stamps on there. Eventually it just looks like one super futuristic soccer ball or something like that. Okay, so we need to go into drag dot and drag this around. The focal shift needs to be greatly reduced. Intensity needs to go up. Not that much though. It looks about right. And now we need to play with the mid value. Still too high. Too low, so in between those. So let's try a value of 30 or so. Too low, or too high a value, but too low into the mesh, so we can go to 25. Getting closer, but we still need to go down a little bit more. Let's try 20. Too high, so 21. Too high, 22. 23. Perfect. That is brilliant. And you can see we're just getting just ever so slightly of a, you may not be able to see it in the video, but there is a slight thing there. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on radial fade to about 2. And that is going to give us a brilliant look. So we can go ahead and just kind of accentuate our thing over here into a Triforce of mechanical detail, and then we can save the brush. Okay, so now we're going to create a pretty basic brush here. I'm going to turn on radial symmetry again, and I'm going to go ahead and go into the standard brush, go back to the normal version of it. I'm going to go ahead and just ever so slightly paint into this. And then what I want to do is I want to smooth it out drastically. So I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out, just like so. And after this is all smoothed out, this actually can be used as is, but I'll go ahead and cut one more into it, just like about that. And I think I saw Cedric Sayot do this. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name, but it was a really cool effect. It kind of gives a little bit of a softer mechanical effect because of the less harsh lines that we're using. But it's a great effect nonetheless, so I'm going to go ahead and just cut into this ever so slightly and relax it just a bit. There we go. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So we can go ahead and you'll notice that everything is negative, so we can flip it and just use the positive brush. We always got to think positive, right? So we come over here. I'm going to divide it one more time. Oopsies. But I want to divide it smooth just so I can get rid of that, because that might translate into artifacting in the alpha, and we don't want that. So we can grab the document, clone our brush, change it to the drag dot type, change the focal shift, the intensity, come back over here. We might need to turn on just a tad bit of radial fade. Okay, so we're getting a bit of banding here. So we actually might need to play with the mid value just a bit. Turn it to maybe 1. And that is what's going to fix it. We want this to work subtractively, so we can change that to Z sub. And so this is gonna give us nice kind of little details. Nice little kind of divots, maybe, I don't know what it's for, but it looks cool. So use it, it's great. And let's see here, so we can go ahead and save this brush off as number 6 of the Eat 3D mechanical brush selection. Okay, so I think one more brush will really do it to finish off these stamping brushes that we're creating. It's really just a kind of variation of a few of the other ones we've done. I'm pretty sure you probably have the idea by now, but just to hammer it home and just to kind of add one more brush to the collection. If you end up messing up any of your brushes, you can just go ahead and click Reset All Brushes. And after a few moments, it'll just kind of fix everything that you've ever messed up. So I just want to use this standard brush, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out the surface a bit. It's a bit much, so go ahead and turn on the intensity. And if you ever want to smooth it out a bit more, you can go ahead and go down through the subdivisions to get that effect. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and actually use the clipping brush for this. So I don't have any perspective on, so I can go ahead and turn off symmetry and go over to my clipping brush and just kind of clip off the top of this about right there. And then I can turn back on symmetry of the radial type, turn up the radial count just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and invert this and clip it again. Actually, I lied. I want to do that, but I also want to remask right about here. I want to unmask right about there, and then I want to remask. Okay, perfect. So now I can actually go ahead and use inflate as well. And I think I'll go ahead and do that. Just so I have a little bit more control, or I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. Alright, so that looks pretty good. There's going to be one thing I'm going to want to do with this, and that is to kind of relax the overall structure. So I'm going to go ahead and just use polish a bit too much though. And so if your polish is using too much, you can just go ahead and redivide it and then use the polish brush. And it'll kind of make the polish function just chill just a little bit. And so we can go ahead and come into our X symmetry. And by modifying the brush the same way we did last time, by changing the size and intensity values so that they affect the brush, or they affect the surface 100% no matter what, we can just go ahead and come in here and hold shift to make a straight line and cut another circle into here. Actually, I want to make that just a little bit smaller. Okay, and so that's, we can actually turn on Y symmetry too, just to make sure we're in the very center. Alright, so there we go, and you'll be delighted to know that all of this is in the positive as well. So we can just go ahead and frame it, zoom in ever so slightly to about there, giving myself a little buffer. We'll grab the dock, clone our brush, change the radial, or the focal shift, excuse me, and the intensity, we'll move that up a bit. Come back into our sphere, that looks so pretty right now, and start away on the testing. You'll notice I always forget something when I'm making these brushes. There's always something. Okay, so I'm fairly certain I don't need to affect the mid value, but maybe just a tad bit. We'll try 1. Okay, and that is too much, so I'm just going to go ahead and use a combination of radial fade and nothing, because radial fade worked. We can just go ahead and use radial fade, and you can see when you get over meshes that are kind of uneven surfaces, at this sharp 90-degree turn that we have from our previous brush, it'll tweak and warp the brushes a little bit. So you kind of want to use them on even surfaces. It's just something to keep in mind. They can distort over highly differential surfaces. So we can go ahead and just drag a few of these out. And with a combination of these brushes and the Damien standard brush, you can really get a lot of nice effects. A lot of nice kind of mechanical suit details. And a lot of these actually work on soft sci-fi suits as well. You'll see these kinds of things poking out of people's bodysuits, like of Evangelion and shows such as that. So yeah, that pretty much covers all of the creation of brushes. I could do a whole bunch more, but yeah, I think by now it's been driven well home. So let's go ahead and move on to the next video.